Okay, we've got a Corvette C8 behind us, completely dismantled. Let's look at it. All right, so before we get into it, some background. This car was purchased by some folks who planned to turn it into a kit car, kind of its own supercar. They stripped the whole thing down and decided, oh, this is going to be way too difficult. It makes more sense to go with a custom frame. So they sold the car in basically 1,000 pieces to Darko, who runs Pacific Motors. It's an exotic car salvage slash parts company in Detroit. So here he is with his friends trying to put the thing back together to do some burnouts. Just to give you an idea, Darko's former steel factory is now just filled with supercars. There's a huge junkyard outside, and there are just rows and rows of supercar parts. It's pretty epic. Worth mentioning, I'm not going to be doing a deep dive here. We're just going to look at the angles of this car that we haven't seen before, because this is a unique opportunity. Let's get into it. Got the heat exchangers up front. Fans. You can see there's aluminum frame holding the fans in place and holding up the heat exchangers. You can see the cooling lines here. We've got an ABS pump right there on that cross member. 12-volt battery is up high, surprisingly high. All right, so this is clearly not the ABS pump. There are only two hard lines going into it. This is actually the hydraulic lift pump for raising the suspension, for getting over curbs and stuff like that. You can see in this image here the ABS pump just in front of the firewall. Here's the bracing again for the heat exchanger and just front end. So back when the C8 debuted, I wrote a detailed article on the engineering underneath the skin. So you should read that. I mentioned the cooling system in that article. I'm just going to quote a small piece from that article here. Up front are two large outboard radiators which send cold liquid coolant in parallel rearward to cool the engine and transmission. There's no dedicated air-to-water transmission cooler. Instead, as the two radiators send coolant rearward toward the engine bay, the fluid tees off to cool three main components: the engine itself, the transmission's oil-to-coolant stack heat exchanger, which you'll see later in this video, and the engine stack oil-to-liquid heat exchanger, which I think you'll also see later in this video. Now here's a look at the suspension. This is we'll have a look at the rear suspension in a moment. Okay, so quick note here. This is a short, long-arm double wishbone setup with monotube shocks, similar to the outgoing C7, but you'll notice there is no transverse leaf spring. Instead, coilovers. See this nice cast part here? This seems like a good time to mention the body structure, which is made up of a number of materials, but mostly of aluminum. The C8's chief engineer, Taj Yuchter, told me over the phone a while ago that this car makes the most use of high-pressure die casting in General Motors history. The six largest castings you see in the main structure are called the Bedford Six. They're named after the location where they're built, Bedford, Indiana, in case you were curious. We'll look at the other side as well. Underneath. All right, I'm going to pause here just to point out, look at this giant cast cradle. Okay, yeah, we can keep going. Here's the gutted interior.
So that would mean I got the carpet over here.
Here's the dash.
What? I got one plug on my computer box. I had 2 plugs on it. I only got one of them to find my own location. The other one's just dangling. But it looks like it's a dangler. Let me see.
There's the fuse box right there between the seats
I think we'll probably
on the rear firewalls.
Yeah.
Speaker. Another speaker hole over here. Seat belts up there. For all of you restraints engineers watching this, here are a couple of photos of that seat belt setup.
This clearance here, we don't need this forward and back a little bit, maybe?
We have to do the shift and
Okay, all right.
because we don't know what our line is. Yeah. We'll just have to keep an eye on the one EC line right there.
Send it back to the assembly.
Some sort of, it says Bose, so it's some sort of I don't know if that's an amplifier, if that's what this is hiding under the footwell.
Yeah. So I think that's it, right? Maybe?
How much body work you've done, but I'm having like anxiety just looking at all those panel gaps.
Here's the rear cradle. So here it is. The 495 horsepower 6.2 liter small block V8 bolted to an 8-speed automatic transmission, all sitting on top of a cast aluminum cradle which bolts onto the body from underneath with just a few giant bolts. And we'll see that installation process here in a minute. Engine and transmission.
Well, you might be a good body guy.
Yeah.
Here's the suspension.
There's really no such thing as a fast body guy. So.
Yeah.
Like the front suspension, we're looking at a double wishbone setup back here with coilover shocks.
I mean, none of it's easy. It's just
Okay, we're going to get some pretty cool shots of the motor here. Keep an eye out for that dry sump lubrication reservoir. It's pretty big, hard to miss.
Yeah. I painted, my dad painted a couple cars when I was a kid.
Computer?
I got a little bit, enough to know. Oh, shit. I was like out of high school. A lot of my buddies were getting jobs.
This is the front of the engine here.
This money is awesome.
Toward the front of the car, AC compressor.
They hear their lives, but man, they're making money. I'll tell you that. They make $100 grand a year.
Yep.
Sorry,
I guess
guys.
I can't play none of this. It's got to run. So.
All right, we're going to have a decent look at the top of the 8-speed dual clutch transmission here. Have a look at the transmission cooler up top. I'm just documenting this because I'm never going to see this again.
Yeah.
So I'm just going
I've seen one apart.
to... Not like this, yeah. Brakes. Park brake here.
Yeah, oh yeah. I think that's the oil tank.
Cast an aluminum knuckle. There are the spark plugs. Here you can see the ignition coils bolted to the side of the block. The blue spark plug wires reach up to the plugs in the cylinder head. It looks pretty elegant.
But I guess. No way that's a oil tank. No, maybe.
Yeah.
Is this an evap canister here? What is this?
Oh yeah, it's definitely an oil tank. Yeah, that's that.
Yeah, usually I think we put the whole exhaust on it.
Let's look from underneath here. Okay, we got an engine. Well, it looks like an engine oil cooler of some sort.
He works in the part of
Drain plug there in the corner.
Autonomous stuff. That's why him and I kind of crossed paths. But he works in like the pre-production facility. Basically, they do it's like a hand-built assembly line. Right. So he did a ton of these, and then now they're doing the like install or whatever it's called, but the tool over at PM, wide body. So he's taking.
Yeah. Makes it easier.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like a good dude. He's like super nice. He does like great jobs with people on his lunch break. So he's happy to do something.
Oh, he sounded really excited.
I'm gonna go into this engine bay here.
He's always been fascinated with the Rolls Royce and whatever is going on down here. Do you remember when he came over to summer with me? Yeah. Like a big kind of looks kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Sounds awesome.
Huh. Fuel?
I found a screw Testarossa back over there.
Notice all of this space here. Now, why is there this space here? If there's no exhaust, if there's no drive shaft, this is clearly making room for an all-wheel drive system. Okay, so I was a bit misleading there. The C8 isn't going to get an all-wheel drive system like you might expect. There won't be a drive shaft in this tunnel. Instead, there will be lithium-ion batteries, which feed an electric motor on the front axle. Jalopnik wrote a story about this based on some official GM documents. I had the pleasure of editing Bozy Tatarevic, who wrote the story, so definitely check that out. It's worth mentioning that the front knuckles have closeout panels, which are clearly meant to allow for an axle shaft to drive the front wheels. So definitely provisions here for an all-wheel drive system.
I'll throw it in here. Feel free.
So these aren't all of the Corvette's body panels. Darko, the guy who runs this shop, Pacific Motors, told me that the previous owner had to actually cut some of the body panels since they were actually glued to the rear part of the chassis. So Darko is now working to try to get some new panels.
Took my time to clean them up.
Really?
Unlike Jason just ramming screws into spots they don't belong. Hey man.
I'm not exactly sure what my deal is here. Why do I keep focusing on this tunnel? But while we're here, these hard lines up top, these are coolant and refrigerant lines from the heat exchangers up front to the powertrain out back.
Oh yeah, that's all.
I think you got to check something.
Arguably the most exciting part of vehicle assembly. This is called decking in the industry, chassis decking. It's where the body usually gets dropped on top of the chassis, or the chassis raises up, or some combination, just some marriage between the powertrain, which is sitting on a cradle, and the body itself. You might be surprised with how few bolts actually hold that subframe to the body. It's just a few really big bolts.
That probably just clears this out.
Alright, so in case you're curious, Darko in the gray sweater is spinning a tap into the rear suspension control arm mounting points. He just wants to clean out those threads so that the bolts go in cleanly.
Do we have to come back and see what's the
Let me just point out how cool of a shot this is. I'm underneath watching this engine get bolted into a C8 Corvette. Now look at the top of this shot. You can see where all the coolant lines are just kind of dangling there, waiting to be hooked up to that water pump and various other connections on the engine. Okay, I said this wouldn't be a deep dive, so I'm not going to get too deep into it, but I did label this picture. You can see what's going on here with the engine, the main components. Yeah, it's all quite exciting. For those of you curious about the subframe to body mounting provisions, you can see this picture on the bottom there, the two forwardmost bolt holes. And then on the left side, you can see another location where a bolt holds that subframe to the body. And then in this image is another one. There are obviously corresponding ones on the other side, so that accounts for 6 of them, maybe, I don't know. Maybe there were only 6 in total, maybe 8, maybe 10. Not a whole lot of bolts holding that subframe to the body. That's pretty normal in the auto industry.
Right there. I think that'll clear it. Right? I'm just looking at
You guys let me know when you're ready.
Hold on 1 sec.
How's the AC line?
Hold on 1 sec.
And then there's the power line that goes to the alternator.
Yep, I got the power line in my hand. Okay, go ahead.
All right, going down.
Okay, hold on 1 sec. Alright, how we routing this power line in? Just go These hoses go here. Does this stay up? It stays up here on top of these hoses, right?
Yeah, because it's got to make it.
Does it gotta go on now?
Yeah, I'm sure to see where this lands.
Yeah, it'll look better when it gets up higher in there.
Okay, so leave this out here.
Yeah, just leave
Okay,
it.
all right, okay.
Yeah.
All right, we're good.
Alright, going down.
You can see Adam underneath the car holding something red. That's the main alternator wire. He's just making sure it doesn't get pinched during decking.
Well, hang on, stop. Okay, all right.
Ready?
I haven't mentioned it yet. You might be wondering what the big black nylon thing is, and right behind the engine. It's part of the intake. At certain angles, you can see the filter. The shot also shows one of the valves for the active exhaust. It's just right there on the left side, right near the exhaust tips.
Yep.
Going down.
And it was like the whole side of the. Yep, got it.
Hold on a second. Hang on, stay right there for a second. I got check. Shit, where's my shit?
Phone? I got you. Here. What?
My our universal flashlights will come back there.
Yeah, maybe gotta go towards driver's side. Here.
This is a little school.
So I jumped in the car where the guy's standing just to see what he's seeing. It's pretty epic. Check it out.
Yeah. Brakes are in trouble.
Yeah, we got some rubber hoses.
Keep at it, boy.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me if you need me to move.
No, it's all good.
I will respond.
Okay.
I mean, you're having to change the harp. Just watch this one. Chevy Corvette. I put you a nice 86.
What? No take backs. You're buying the white one. No advance bucks.
And they're going to come out the radiator out the side. So we
I
just
know, I had to go and cover it.
They'll come up here. I got them starting to come in. Oh, that's got to keep it on.
I got this heat shield.
I would just watch that mobile.
Yeah, that's it.
All the new Jalopnik. So they're making sure not to crush any hoses and lines, it looks like, as they deck that engine into the back of the vet.
Yeah, and then there's two more. One will meet the other side, and the other two go there. And then you got their radiator. Yeah, so that's just there. Yeah. One. First thing will be the struts.
It's a Z51.
Does somebody want to grab the wires?
Yeah, I'm trying to watch some brake lines.
Tug on a little
There's a
bit?
lot to watch from down here.
Probably, yeah.
I gotta get that on the inside of that, and this on the, I think I got all this organized up here. We're pretty much settled down in here.
I'm ready over here.
All right.
Come on, bring her down. Bit at a time, Darko.
Alright, everyone ready?
We're ready.
Alright, go down.
All right, so here everybody's just trying to make sure that the coilovers go into their towers, that the studs go through the holes. It's all fairly straightforward.
Sounds good. Here, which is the one.
Probably gonna come this way too.
Brian said he's doing like a back half in his arch setup pretty much.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. Hey, I started this.
Hang on one second here.
Getting the upper control arms mounted to the body was a little tricky. The move was to roll the cart underneath each side's control arm so that we could compress the spring and align the bolt holes for the control arms.
So you helping guide the strut?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I got a line under here. I'm not real sure about.
Control arm mounting
Right
point.
here. What side is this? Oh, wait a minute. This is hooked to something here. Right to here. Okay, hang on. Where does this one go? No. Is this on the right?
Hey guys.
Here.
Look at, see right here where we're crossed over here? Yeah, that's good. On this side? On my side?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can deal with that later.
But what?
It ain't gonna get trapped.
Okay,
Just
okay, I
keep
see
it
now.
out.
I see. Okay, here we go. All right.
Yeah.
I was
It's gonna
concerned
come.
because we're on both sides of that heat
Yeah,
shield.
we can
All right, that's
deal
good.
with it.
All
Just as
right,
long as it's out of harm's way. Now we're on top of that. There we go. We gotta make sure we don't crush that.
Yep. No, and this should all be loose still here. Is that
This
close?
There you go. And these go down like this and bolt to that cross member.
Right
That's
here.
it.
Right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Perfect.
Then what we got to do is see the front. We're like right up in here. So that's good. That
We
pretty
just
dang
clicked
close.
here. That's what that
what
noise
we
was.
clicked. Yep.
All right, so this is just guiding these two main parts of the subframe into the right position on the body so that the bolt holes can slide up and mate the two pieces.
Yeah, I saw that. It kept moving. Now, wait a minute. Okay, so that line's sitting on top of here. That one's good. Both of these are floating all the way across, right to here. This goes up above this, right? This.
Yeah. This
So we got to take this off. Watch yourself. This will rip up.
So these are fuel and cooling lines?
Yeah. And those are a bugger to get on, but I mean it is what it is. That's
Yeah,
just
this has got to come out from the front of the screen.
So right there where the guys are working is where all the coolant and refrigerant lines hook up to that engine. There are also some brake line attachments there. There's just a lot of stuff to keep track of in this area. After I left, the crew actually got the Vet running, and Darko took it out in the streets of Detroit. So definitely check out Mob Steel Detroit on YouTube to see some of that madness. Darko told me he was surprised by how quickly his team was able to reassemble the vehicle and get it running and driving, especially given how many electronic systems the car has. The car had a zillion errors on it, he told me, mentioning that the vehicle thinks the missing doors are ajar and that the also missing hood is unlatched. But the computer still let it run and do what it was supposed to do, he continued. After some initial prep work, getting the motor in and the C8 driving only took about 3 hours, Darko told me, although he admits that one of his buddies is an expert on the C8 Corvette, so that was a bit of a cheat code. Still, this is a mass-produced car, and mass-produced cars are meant to go together efficiently.